Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Urban Native Era podcast. My name is Hud Oberly, aka Huddleberry Finn. I'm the creative director of Urban Native Era, where we specialize in clothing design and content to increase the visibility of Indigenous peoples. Like I said, this is episode 3. We come to you every Tuesday on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. You can watch the whole podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe and follow us on all those things. And we also have social medias just for the podcast, at UNE Podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Please find us there. Let us know what you think so far. And please share to your Instagram story. We'd really appreciate that. We want to know how you're listening. We want you to share the wealth of the UNE podcast and kind of, get it out there. That's the currency. We don't ask for money. We just want you to share with a friend, a little follow, a little subscribe, all that good stuff. So, as I mentioned, my name is Hud Oberly, if we haven't met before. And today we're talking about your story. You as the listener, your story. And so we're a new podcast. I'm trying things out. I've never hosted a podcast before. These are solo podcasts. I'm excited about it, but I just want to try different things out. So I'm a big quote guy. I can internalize quotes. I can get them to motivate me. So I'm going to share with you the quotes I'm going to mention in the podcast, and we'll touch on them when we get to that point. So the first one is from Steve Cook, who's a fitness influencer on YouTube and influencer. So he said, whatever life you have right now, that's on you, and it's your job to make it better. So we'll break that down later. Just wanted to share it first. And the second one is actually, I added it later. There we go. Quote number 2 is, the little things only catch up to you when the big things are on the line. Pat McAfee, former NFL punter, and now does a lot of media stuff as well. And the third one is, what a wonderful life I've had. I only wish I'd realized it sooner. And that's from the movie Colette with Keira Knightley. So all those quotes, some of those are my favorites. Some of those, I keep a note in my phone about like all these quotes I run across, whether it's like a statue in Washington, D.C. That's where my first quote started from. But or I run across something else, so it just can be on the internet. So those are the quotes. So I thought about this topic especially because in the future, we're going to have guests and artists and creatives, entrepreneurs come and share their story with me and with you as a listener. And hopefully that story of how they got to where they are or where they're trying to get to kind of gives you an outline of how to get to where they are. And so we just want you to think about, what is your story? What would you share on this podcast? If you were to come on, what would your story be about? Whatever it is that you do, whether you're an artist or entrepreneur or including being a parent, or it doesn't have to be artist or entrepreneur, but just what is your story? So like I said, if you were to come on this podcast, what would you want? Let me start over on that. If you were to come on this podcast, what would you want to be the story, your story that you would tell? Would it be a story of overcoming? Would it be a story of living an exciting life? Would it be a story of something based around family, or a combination? What is it? And the reality of that story is that right now, that's not the final. You're not on the final page or the final chapter of your story. That's what's exciting. Super exciting to kind of look ahead and be able to look ahead and know that there's more out there. And so, some people, I don't know if they like to or not, but some people think that they don't have control of their story. And, especially in this pandemic, like people, I think, are easy to feel like they don't have control, which is either because they, like I said, they want to, or they are feeling the effects of the stress and anxiety of this pandemic, like they don't have control. So I haven't thought too much about that feeling of lack of control, but I've heard other people talk about it, and they say it could be like a genuine feeling of lack of control, or maybe like it's kind of safer to feel like what you make your life isn't in your control. Like you have the accountability and responsibility, if it's responsible, maybe not, but accountability to make your life as great as you want to make it. And so, like I said, that may be a tough pill to swallow if that is you or someone you know. But Let me kind of explain that a little more. So let's say whatever it is that you do, you can't do your shows, you can't do these live events, you can't do whatever it is that you do, but in this pandemic. But so what? Like what? How are you going to adjust to what's going on? And so the story and the goal, your goal of the story that you want doesn't have to change. It can stay the same, but the path to getting there is probably changing by the hour, if not even more often than that. So, and especially like no one planned for this crazy time that we're living in right now, but the things and the situations and the paths change, and your accomplishments or your in story isn't going to reflect that path. It's most likely going to be some hopefully great accomplishment, great life goal achieved, or just a kind of a happy ending to what you're working towards. But it's not gonna show the hard work or the time taken or the sacrifice that it took to get there. So in episode 1 of this podcast, we had CEO founder Joey Montoya on, and he said a little quote, this won't be exact, but something about it's good to plan, but it's good to plan, like 5 years ahead, but it's not always the most important thing. And I think what I just said about the path is ever changing. Like you can plan 5 years ahead, and I think you can have like maybe a qualitative goal, but like something quantitative, like maybe it's going to change so much just in like a few days or a few months or a year, or maybe, even 5 years especially. I think looking at me as an example, I got my advertising degree from college, went to work marketing for a family member's business, went to go be a bartender at 747 in Norman, Oklahoma, worked as a credit union ad agency intern, worked for a sports marketing agency part-time, luckily got a job out here in California working for Sundance Institute's Indigenous program as a coordinator, honestly kind of like a glorified assistant, and then becoming creative director of Urbanative Era. So that path, like if you look at that, you probably think like, what the hell is that? Like looking at that, you're not going to see that each one of those steps has got me closer to where I want to be and my end goal. And so that's, I guess, maybe you can really relate that to the first quote of whatever life you have right now, that's on you, and it's your job to make it better. So, all those little steps I had, bartending or doing whatever, I knew those weren't my story wasn't complete. It wasn't even close. It's not even close to being finished right now. It's still a long ways away. And I think many of you do have a lot of room to look forward to as well. And like I said, I can internalize that quote of whatever life you have is on you, and it's your job to make it better. And I know that's on you part may be like people may have a response to that, but that's the control of everything isn't obviously true, because things happen and there's unfortunate circumstances, but your response to those unfortunate circumstances are as much of your story than the accomplishments, and especially on the path to getting to those accomplishments. So I think those are important to consider as the path, and as some things that people may not see when they see your story and just looking at just the page of what your story may be. They're not going to see the how you react to those circumstances, but those reactions are going to influence the end story. So I think it's important to break down two different versions that I've kind of seen as part of the story. So there's like an external story and there's an internal story. So externally first, it's your story for both of those internal externals, like a book or like a movie. And like I said, I worked for in the film industry before this job, and I learned really quick, because my background wasn't in film, I learned real quick what a log line is. And so a log line is usually just a one sentence synopsis of that whole movie, which movies can be an hour and a half to 3 hours, and that's a 3 hour movie is 180 pages of script. And so squeezing that whole 180 pages into one sentence it's going to leave out a lot of details, and that's what people are going to see about your story. It's going to be a really shortened version of, and it's going to leave out those details. And so that's something to consider when you're going after this sweet, like, awesome goal that you have for yourself. And there's going to be people that see your path and are going to be congratulatory and supportive, but there's also going to be people who maybe critique it, and maybe people that you want to critique it and kind of give you advice. But there's also going to be people that see the log line and then make their judgment and perception off of that. And that's what I want to speak on and say, like, even the advice or the critiques you hear from other people, that stuff doesn't matter. There should be a confidence in your internal story, and knowing that what people are seeing is the external, and everything that you hear about your story, everything, like parents, close friends, no one knows you, no one knows anyone 100%. There's always stuff going on subconsciously, or people are holding back. You don't know anyone 100%, and no one knows you 100%. So anything you hear in regards to your story should always be ran through a filter. And if I can try to explain that more, I think coming back, just speaking from my experience, I have been told by people that I love, close ones, that I should look for jobs in small town Oklahoma. And people have different reasons for giving you advice. Like, people may not know you as well, but I think if you know me, or even if you don't, I think something like that is a little far off for me. But I'm able to just run things through filters, and you have to create a separation and understand how to run things through a filter probably immediately when you hear things, because I don't want you to get affected by advice or a critique of your story really fast, because I don't want that to, like, derail you or think things aren't possible or anything. Like, you should only be listening to yourself, and that's why it's so important to talk positively to yourself and, like, affirm your goals in your head. Like, you can do it, because you can. There's paths to everything. So let me just make sure I got the notes on the external. So yeah, you just have to be real with yourself. Be open to the opinion. Like, I do believe there's good advice out there to be taken and to be had, but just make sure you run that through a filter and just consider things, their accuracy, and whether to act on it or not. So then internally, I think this is my favorite, because I think there's a certain level of comfortability you have to be with yourself to love the internal story of you, because there's a lot of just these days, there's a lot of stress and anxiety about all this stuff you have to do, or you see other people doing, like comparing yourself. And that's where the internal story is literally just the internal story. And the comparing is maybe someone or you that is looking at the log line of the external story, or they're looking at the log line and comparing it to their internal story with all the details, all the good, the bad, everything. So the internal story is that whole movie script, that whole book, that whole everything. All the details of your story, and whether you accept all the details or not, all of them. And you can't you can't just forget them like they didn't happen. You have to be aware of all those details that have happened. And so the internal story is your story is going to be whatever you do towards what you want your story to be. And so I'm going to repeat that because I know it's kind of wordy. Your story is going to be whatever you do towards what you want your story to be. Because everyone has, I think, a vision of what their story, their life, what they want their life to be. And, it can just be little passings of, like, little thoughts, but things that really hold as far as how you visualized your life or your story. I don't want to mention life too much, but, like, your story that you would share to your community, to your friends, to a podcast, to close friends and family. And so your ideal story that you keep in your head internally is going to change. Like, not all of us became firefighters and professional athletes or teachers like we told our kindergarten class. And so things are going to change, and life happens. And I don't think, when people maybe think life's out of their control, like, things do happen, but it's about adjusting to those things and keeping control of your life, and knowing that they have that control so you can take advantage or take action on that. So when you picture your ideal life, you just, I guess, the one that you want to share with your community or the people close to you is like, how are you getting to that life story, and are you doing it right now? In our last episode talked about like finding the time to learn, not necessarily picture an end goal of, the example is writing a book, but I don't like that example. But instead of writing a book and selling it, the idea was finding time to learn about finding a publisher or like working on your writing skills. Those were the steps, not the very end goal. It's about finding the time to grow and set yourself up for that opportunity. And are you consistently thinking about that story or visualizing it? Visualizing it has such an impact, because I think the more you visualize it, the more you can think about the steps to get to that end story or that life goal or that story you want to tell, or teach or inspire with. And so the quote number 2 is the little things only catch up to you when the big things are on the line. And so the internal story you create is your life experience. And so the little things are like the details, or like what I just spoke about with finding the time to just, learn for an hour. Learning for an hour in the scope of your story at the end of your career, whatever it may be, is like a very tiny detail. But that little thing is what the building blocks to set yourself up for that opportunity that presents itself. And you just want to be, the details are where the larger story is made. And so I'm going to read from my notes right here, so I want to get this right. The details are what is going to be in the limelight when the opportunity presents itself. The opportunity of you making your story what you want is going to rely on the little things. I actually want to repeat that because I want to make sure that's understood. The details are where the larger story is made. The details are what is going to be in the limelight when the opportunity presents itself. The opportunity of you making your story what you want is going to rely on the little things. So I think I really believe that, and that's where you can see where someone is working too. You can notice, like, people with a good eye on that can notice when someone is leveling up with baby steps, and then that's kind of the thing about, like, you don't notice like you getting tall, or if you work out a lot, like you don't notice the small things because you see it every day. But if you were to see a family member, like your nieces or nephews or someone, and you see them a year later, you're going to notice that growth. But it's like a little growth every day. And so you create that story that you get to experience, and that's the story that matters. Like I said, like the internal story is what you want to be comfortable with, happy with. That's going to be your life experience, and you want to enjoy that. You want that to make you happy, and you want to be able to look back on that and have no regret, know that you had tackled the opportunities and the goals that you had as much as you could, and that's what you want to be able to look back on. So there's no log lines in the internal story. There's only all the details, and that's exciting. That's the fun part, I think, of being comfortable with that story and being comfortable with yourself. Is like it's you, and you have your people that you love and care about and can support you, but you're gonna look back at those things that you did when you were alone, or when you were up early, when you were up late at night, and really just kind of like working, if that's in the cards of what your end goal is. But I think that's the stuff that's important to look at and be aware of. And I think that's bring it back to quotes, is like being able to internalize and be aware when you read something like, "What a wonderful life I've had. I only wish I'd realized it sooner." So that's something that you want to realize and be aware. Like, some of these opportunities aren't going to present themselves anymore. There's this chapter of your story is only going to possibly take part at this moment, and you want to do all those things to prepare yourself for that story so that you can share it and that you can inspire other people, and you can take it to your community, whatever that's an online community, your physical community, a group, your family. That's something you want to something to live on maybe to your future family, to your grandkids, whatever that is, if you think in those ways. But that's the thing I think to think about too, is like, I say all these things and I don't want that to put stress or pressure on people. Like, it's living, like you've had a great life and a wonderful life, and it could be worse, and the best part about it is it can be better. And so we're all lucky to be alive right now. I hope that if you're listening to this podcast, that means you're doing good and well, and that you have the time to listen to me blabber on. So we at Urban Native Era are happy that you're listening to us right now. We are doing a lot of things right now. We're staying busy. We appreciate all of your support, and the biggest support for this podcast is just to follow us, subscribe to us on our social media platforms, on our podcast platforms, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter at UNE Podcast or Urban Native Era Podcast. We appreciate you every Tuesday, and like I've said, I'm going to say it every time, I am the only one running those UNE podcast accounts. I want y'all to engage with me. I hope to do a podcast in the future more so that you guys can get to know me. But for now, I want you guys to DM me at UNE Podcast. Let me know what you think. I just want to talk to y'all. I want to hear what y'all think and see what's working for you. See what you're up to in the quarantine season. So that's it for today. I don't know if that was quick. It felt quick to me. Every Tuesday, we'll see you here. Have a good rest of your day.